Hi everyone, Pete Seligman here with the Next Step podcast. Now I'm here with Wes Hall from Tomorrow Super, and we're going to be talking about his journey in starting up this great business. Where I want to start is there's been a few pretty big milestones in the last couple of months that you've managed to get, signing on, good distribution, getting the platform up and running, and those kind of milestones. When you hit one of those and suddenly you secure that big contract or you get that big deal, how does it feel in that moment, then reflecting on like that first, what was it, a beer at a pub or something like that, where
tequila maybe involved.
Right, there you go, right? Where you suddenly thought, I've been running down, I just go and start up my own superannuation business, right? And then finally you get to a point where, far out, this thing's working. Like, how does that feel?
It's been the best part of 3.5 years from that sort of like germination of an idea to kind of where we're at now, and it feels pretty surreal almost. Like it's I don't think I ever doubted that I'd get there, but there's been moments that have been pretty trying, and so it's only really been in the last kind of couple of weeks that I know that we'll get there, and so that's been interesting. And there's been you touched on a couple of big contracts, and I've been through a kind of capital raise process, and there's a few cool things we're doing within the team, and they've all sort of come together, and it kind of feels like they all came quickly, right?
They did.
And so but some of those things took 2 years in the making to get there, right? And most sort of at a milestone that we kind of reached last Friday, and I kind of wanted to celebrate, but then I was like, how are we going to acquire all these customers that we need, right? And I was actually kind of chasing myself, because I should be celebrating that, but I was just like, now it's on to the next thing, right? And so I was thankful I've got some sort of supportive people in and around me, either within the business or sort of advisors or kind of family members that are actually able to identify that it's a pretty big milestone. And
take a breath, mate. That looks good.
And so that's probably, and that it gives good energy to the team. Really like that sort of sense of renewal that you get with a significant milestone like that.
So quite often the startups that are around today are, like an app for booking a restaurant, or someone wants to have a new fashion brand or something like that. Something that's a bit different about yours is it's actually got a certain serious angle to it, right? Yeah. And so not only have you managed to build all of the funky stuff around the business that you're developing, you've actually had to get some pretty serious kind of licenses approved and, stack up against some pretty old and incumbent kind of operators in that space. So that as well is a massive success story, really. And a lot of the things that I talk about when we're talking about kind of progress is this kind of curve that you end up on, where you spend, and you're saying kind of 3.5 years, that your investment of time and energy and money is pretty consistent, right? Yeah. But actually the outcomes take a while to come through. But then when they do, like you're saying, suddenly they come in relatively quick succession, because things start to layer on top of each other. Like, because you got that license, then you get that contract, then you get that customer, then and all these things start to snowball. So do you want to tell us a bit about the business, and maybe start less with where it is today, and a bit about like what was the foundation of why you really thought this would be a good idea, and what was the gap, and why did you want to fill that?
So Tomorrow Super is the business. I started really, I guess, a bit of dissatisfaction why. Two things. So why people didn't connect better with their finances, and also why wasn't there any real genuine innovation, and I felt like there's a big disconnect. And so myself and some of the other members of the team had sort of come from sort of that big financial services kind of background, and we all could feel it, right? Like you kind of get constrained by the machine and the lack of genuine innovation, and kind of want to doing something different. And I deliberately use those words rather than risk, because everyone kind of is risk, but this is kind of more about just kind of having a go and knowing that you're not going to quite get it right the first time. And so it's really hard for big corporates to get on a path. That was the original idea. You can't iterate away from that. And so for us, it started off with how do we engage millennials better in their finances? And we sort of moved away a little bit from that as we kind of learned more, is because not all millennials are the same. And I think generally they get a bad rap, but in our space, in superannuation, and that's a big part of the financial services system in this country, so that's where we naturally kind of started.
Actually, right? Almost overgrown a little bit, but
it's huge. And so, but how do we kind of help people better connect with that? And we kind of learned when talking to millennials, and we talked to a lot of people that they're like, well, I don't really care about superannuation, and so you've kind of got to also play to, well, what do people care about? How do you get them to be better connected with it? And so we've sort of landed on having a target market, if you like, that is more about stage and less about age. And so,
I see. Yeah.
Because there's 22-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 52-year-olds that all might be at sort of different levels of financial maturity, and they want to care more about their future. They have more of a plan in getting organised mentality, and so we're trying to tap into those people that actually want to lean into their finances a bit more, care more about it.
So when you first set out, you had a view that maybe your audience would be defined by their age, whereas actually through that process you had to pivot a bit to say, you know what, it's not actually that audience based on that demographic around age group. It's actually based on the way in which they approach their finances and the way in which they think that's
spot on, absolutely. And so they and so that's been kind of really insightful. And then so if they're trying to lean into it, what do they care about? And so it's there's an education element to it. Increasingly, people care a lot more about where and how their money's invested. And it's been a lot of people think of superannuation as a big black box, but in actual fact, it's just an investment vehicle that's got a broad choice of underlying kind of investment, and just happens to be taxed more concessionally as a result of kind of, for most people, just investing it directly for themselves in a bank account or in the shares directly.
So kind of demystify that a bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can see in some of your kind of approach to social media and getting your positioning in the marketplace, that demystification has been a pretty clear messaging coming through there.
Yeah.
Have you found that that's like, how's been your testing in the market so far around getting people to understand really the crux of how you're different?
Yeah, it's it's kind of probably more positioning it. Well, you help. They need to have something to anchor onto, and so if you're I don't know, like it's kind of raw genuine innovation, like an Uber or whatever, like or even I know that some of the guys at Afterpay or like some of the kind of other, like it's kind of hard for people to think about, well, what's this new thing? And so you have to anchor back to kind of what they're familiar with. And so when I talk to a lot of people about superannuation, I was like, well, what have you got now? How do you feel about it? And then it's kind of, well, how are we different to that? And so some people have got self-managed super fund, they find the admin a real pain, and they don't feel like it's invested enough in the stuff that's cool. But people have got more traditional super industry funds or retail super, they might get a statement once a year, but they don't really know how it's invested, and they don't know what to do about it, right? And so we're you have to sort of pivot the conversation then also what the proposition is to sort of what people know and have some familiarity with, because we've got very different levels of financial literacy in this country, and so we're trying to deal to all of that.
All of that,
so,
yeah. And so how did you, what was the first 12 months? Like, what did you do in the first 12 months? I mean, you kind of had this great idea, whether it was a couple of beers or a few tequilas or whatever, and you thought, you know what, this just isn't right. We're stuck in this kind of industry. We all know this industry really, really well because we've been operating in it, but really there's a better way here.
Yeah.
Like, what's the first thing you do? Like, then do you go, right, we're going to meet and talk about this? Or, like, how do you actually start?
There's three of us in a mate's living room, sort of around a sort of almost like the living room kind of table. And we started kind of pretty modestly. Like a lot of us we weren't full time in other roles, but we were kind of, this was sort of the almost stereotypical kind of side hustle.
Yeah.
But the more that we tried to understand it, the more that we realised it was a really big problem we were trying to solve. And I think sometimes people that are trying to kick off startups or entrepreneurs try to almost kind of constrain the idea to the amount of time they can dedicate to it. And so I felt like we wouldn't have given it enough respect the opportunity if we didn't dedicate a lot more time to it. I'll come. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But it was a really interesting tipping point for us in terms of going, well, we've got to get really serious about this, right?
Yeah.
But come back to the first 12 months. It's probably just trying getting clear on the proposition and being able to articulate it, being able to test it. And so there was so many kind of random conversations we'd have with people. We'd get people in on with pizza nights and maybe some soft drinks and a couple of beers and just kind of go, this is what we're thinking, right?
Yeah.
And we learned so much from that, right? And so and one of the unexpected kind of insights from that was just sort of the changing kind of landscape of kind of couples and joint decision making and superannuation, for example. So it felt like a very individual kind of notion, and so you now got two people that may not have always been on level footing in a household now making very collaborative, active kind of decisions. And superannuation doesn't deal to that, and so part of how we're thinking about superannuation is how do we deal to a family unit rather than kind of individuals and how they choose to invest together. Right?
And during that process, like there must have been a bunch of people that said, "You're crazy. Like, what are you doing? Just get back to your day job, you idiot. Like why are you trying to disrupt this industry? It's been around for ages. There's no chance." Like, was there a fair bit of that kind of feedback that you had to still push through and say, you know what, like they've got a different view, but I'm going to keep going? Like, what was the balance between, you know what, you're on the right track to you're nuts? What are you doing?
We maybe surprisingly we didn't have too many nuts ideas. I mean, we've felt like we've always been trying to raise capital, so a lot of discussions around that were like, are you too early, or you need to you need to cut your teeth on that, or you need to build the team out. Like, it was generally quite
constructive,
helpful, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. So it might have been a no, but then it would come with a you need this or you need that or try this or
absolutely right. Yeah, so I've been pleasantly surprised that there's sort of this collaborative kind of notion that people have. Like, you can kind of see having a crack, and so and it's I feel that here, but it's interesting. I've had a couple of instances where I've needed to go to the States for work and for leisure, and I think the Americans even do it better than we do.
Yeah, right. They really get behind someone that's going to have a crack at it.
Yeah, and there's no. Sometimes you can feel that there might need to be a genuine value exchange in the interaction that you have, but I don't get that sense as much from the people I interact with in the States, where they're like, well, it's kind of like, I'm just helping the universe, right? It'll come around, and so I've started to see more of that here. I think people kind of get that. There's kind of a bit more of maturity about it. Like, and a couple of guys I started with on tomorrow, that one of the things they taught me, because they'd had some involvement in startups before, is that coming from big corporate, I was kind of fearful that I couldn't share my idea because someone would rip it off, right?
That's exactly the question I was going to ask you next. Like, how did that feel like a really new environment compared to the big corporate environment?
Yeah, it was, and I always go, I need to get people to sign NDAs, and I can only give them a little bit of here or whatever, and it's two guys that I was working with. They said, you just got to understand, you've got to have the skill and the will to make this happen. And so, I'm trying to massively disrupt the $2.8 trillion industry in this country, paying $65 billion a year in fees. Like, it's not a small undertaking to go, we're going to go hard for those traditional super providers, right? And so there's a lot of people that might think, that's an attractive market, but it's much, much harder to execute on it. So,
it's like great ideas are lovely, but it's all about the execution, right? The values in the execution, actually doing it. It's because I often say, when I first moved from bigger businesses into small business, that was something that really stood out to me, was not the lack of competition per se, but more the increasing collaboration. Like, even direct competitors will spend time talking to each other about a problem and then get back in the ring and compete. But that's fine. Then when they're out of the ring, they'll chat about stuff. Whereas it is a lot more closed at the big end of town. And a lot more protective and a lot more concerned about ideas and IP. Probably because the kind of ideas and IP they're talking about are things that their competitors might be able to turn their mind to and execute. Whereas when you're in startup and small business land, like, the gap from idea to execution is relatively big. So
it's almost this co-opetition model.
That's it. Absolutely. And particularly in your space, I imagine, because there's a few people kind of working on that disruption at the same time, right?
Yeah. But it's also being clear on where you think you're going to add value. So some of the big contracts you kind of referred to earlier is, we could go and build out a lot of that stuff, right? And in 10 years' time, we might make more margin if we do that, right? But why not partner with the best in the industry who are very good at what they do in their space, and then think about how do you have an awesome customer experience and can really talk to those groups, right? And so I'm not interested in building kind of really detailed kind of financial record keeping systems.
Yes.
I know
there's someone else that does it,
and they do it great. They'll do it better than I'll ever do it, right? And I'm not going to get in that arms race. And what's the return on investment of that? It's pretty low, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, I don't need a team of 50 people on admin tasks that at the sort of most fundamental level, the customer doesn't really value that much because they just expect it to get done. Right?
Yeah, that's right. We talk a lot about comparative advantage and making sure that you're always just contributing the bit that you can do.
Yeah, right.
I mean, even with this process of pulling together content and things, we're always talking about what are the bits that I can do, what's the bits that Mick can do, and the rest of the guys in the team to make sure that you're really honing in on just that bit that you're adding the most value, and find other people to add the bits of value around that. And that kind of partnership approach is definitely, I mean, I think bigger businesses seem like they're getting better at it, but definitely there's a big difference, right? In that startup world of that collaboration space.
But it's also hard for startups to collaborate with big business.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Because they can be a bit, what are we really giving away here? We're not really quite sure.
Yeah.
It feels a bit innovative. Right? Like it's got, maybe there's some risk associated with it, right?
Yeah.
So it's been part of the journey we've been on, is about the education.
And some of the partners you have are much bigger companies.
Yeah, absolutely, much bigger, right? So,
That's awesome. Yeah. And so you said just then that there was a tipping point at which you suddenly decided, you know what, this is great and we're getting some momentum, but now, let's really get serious about this. How did that play out?
It was...
and what made you suddenly feel like, you know what, we're going to push the button on this, we need to take it to the next level?
Yeah, and it wasn't that, I've only been working on this I've been working on this for 3.5 years. It's not only, but it was a little over 12 months ago that I felt like we were getting there, but we just weren't getting there fast enough, and that perhaps the window around the opportunity might close on us. Because not that I didn't ever think that we weren't going to get there, we just might not get there fast enough. And so it was a really, really small team then. We've had people that are, we've kind of largely been working on this for free for 3 years. That's not for everyone, right? And so it was October last year, and I remember just going, because I could have done all this other consulting work and kind of otherwise had an okay kind of living, and I'd been doing a little bit of that up to that point. And so I said, I'm going to just kick myself if I don't go all in on this. What am I going to think in 5 years from now, where I go, well, it was nice I got all that little sort of that income on the side, and I didn't go 110% on that opportunity. And so, it might have been that in 5 years' time it didn't work. But at least I knew I gave it the best possible crack. And it was I don't know. I'm not overly superstitious or kind of but it was almost like at that moment things changed, right? And so we just got so much luckier, and things started to go our way.
And that must have been a mindset change, right? Like you suddenly, up to that point, you were still putting time and effort in, but there's that phrase. I mean, there's so many kind of quotes that are coming into my mind. The whole concept around. How they say you'll regret more what you didn't do than what you do, that whole concept. But then the other one about how, if you're going to take the island, you've got to burn your boats. If we're really committed, then we're on here, we're going to do this, then I'm going to burn my boats, there's no exit, right? And it sounds like that kind of same kind of mindset change, like we're in, so we're 100 in. And so what are from the outside in, what were the changes that were observable at that point? Like, what did you do differently? If you suddenly thought, now we're really going to commit, how did you change your actual approach at that point?
At the most simple level, it was just more effort. And I think, it sort of messages something to the team as well, about that I'm all in on it, and that I'd never really, because some people have got in my team, I've got a relatively mature team for a traditional startup, and so they've all got stuff. And people have got different stages of their lives. They might have kids, or they've had a successful corporate career, and they don't necessarily want to go 5 days a week, but they kind of knew that I was all in, and so I think it helped provide some clarity there as well. So so I don't know what else might be observable than that, right? And
but
so,
you just took it up a gear, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with you taking it up a gear, then in your wake, then kind of that message to everyone else, you know what, we're really going to do this properly.
Yeah.
So then it kind of helped everyone get comfortable and to also turn it up a gear, I guess. Knowing that you were there doing that.
Yeah, and I think I was probably able to observe a bit more about what was needed, and so it's a big elephant that we're trying to eat, and so how do you kind of break that down and kind of go, well, do it a bite size at a time, and kind of what's important right now, and how do you kind of step through that, and so I think by me being able to be clear about that and kind of test that with others, then I was able to kind of go, well, what in what order, and then who do we need to help work on that, and what existing capability and resources do we have to deliver on that.
Yeah. And so if you were to put a line in the sand at the end of this calendar year, you'll pretty much be launched by then, right? Like, so everything's kind of up and running, you've got all the various pieces of the puzzle in, and probably, I don't know, in rough terms, call it 6 months ago was when a lot of the big pieces started to fall in place. Yeah. And probably only 12 months ago, you kind of changed gear and went through that process. Yeah. But it was actually almost 2.5 to 3 years before that that the idea first came, right? Yeah. Like, what do you think it was that enabled you to keep going through that process? Because that's a long time. It's like that whole concept where they say, an overnight success actually takes like years and years of practice, right? Yeah, absolutely. Like, how did you, what was it that kept you going for that period of time? How did you stay committed to?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I think I'm a pretty determined kind of guy, right? But I think it's just always kind of felt right, and so we just feel like superannuation is not really dealing to the masses that it should, and so there's an opportunity for it to be different, and so being able to kind of check in on that, the overwhelming feedback when you talk to anyone about it, go, oh, that's great, we love it, right? And so it's as much about kind of finding renewal in some of those things that are useful as well. So and I think I've got a good capacity to deal with a lot of stuff, but even just having just basic stuff like lists and kind of being able to go, oh, that was reflect on the end of the day, and I ticked most of those off, and just being able to, and then not necessarily deliberately, but be able to go back and kind of check in on, oh well, actually we've kind of made some of that progress. And one of the things we've had really positive feedback from some of our sort of early investors in our business is just how communicative we've been around the progress we've made. But as a consequence of that, I've had to get more structured in terms of what are we going to do, and then what have we done, and then what have we not deliver, and so it's kind of, there's been a level of accountability that's driven ultimately to our shareholders, right? But also we've got a board, we've got an advisory board, to the team that kind of see that we're actually, there's a bunch of stuff that we said that we're going to do, we're actually delivering it, right? And that's really cool, right?
Yeah. So, and I think there's a lot of startups that fail in that regard. Like, they don't get the timing right in ratcheting up the structure on that spectrum. So, like, you see quite a few that ratchet it up too soon, and then it weighs them down. And there are others that leave it too late, and then they start to make people concerned that they don't have what it takes to actually get bigger. So do you think there's anything in particular that's kind of helped you know how to get that right at the right time?
That one guy, Dan Taylor, who kind of just actually encouraged me. And I know you know Dan.
He's a reference
I know Dan. I know you know Dan well. He's been great, sort of mentor and confidant for me in the business, and so Dan was. He's like, these shareholders they probably should give them an update.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
and then that went from, oh no, it probably doesn't need to be, like, it needs to be a bit better than just an email, right?
Yeah,
And so it's more like...
So just those kind of constant kind of check-ins, just reminding every time, okay, here's where we might now start to tweak and that kind of thing. Because one of the other questions I was going to ask, and whether it's in the last kind of 3 years or in your life more generally, the impact of kind of coaches and mentors that you've had, and as I said, whether it's been on this journey or prior ones, like how have you dealt with the concept of a mentor or a coach, and has it been something that has kind of people that have come and gone in your life and career, or has it been things you've actively sought out to have?
Yeah, I've had, so in corporate life, I've had sort of executive coach, and she was great, and so I've also been fortunate to be on some pretty well-structured, high-performance culture kind of programs, which has taught me a lot about clarity and team dynamics and culture, but you can't afford the cost of those sort of more, and so it had to be different when you're running a startup and running your own small business, and so it's kind of it's seeking out people for coffees, just talking through the proposition, being humble, and
ready to listen to their feedback.
Yeah, right. And I think I've matured a lot in that. Like I would have in the past, wouldn't have wanted to hear it, right? It was almost a criticism, and now it's a bit of a cliche that feedback's a gift, right? But it's actually that people's intent, I think, is pretty pure.
It's generally good. It's pretty rare they're just trying to cut you down.
And so then you don't need to rely on any one opinion, right? And so you can kind of well, if I'm starting to get that feedback from 2 or 3 people, maybe they're right? And so you can kind of just you sort of roll with that a bit, and but even just like the people that you got around you, either be it at work or at home, and just kind of testing stuff, right? It's kind of I think as blokes sometimes it can be hard to do that, right? But that's something I've really developed more of that skill. I think,
almost
right?
by necessity, right? I mean, to get to this point with the business that you've got, you kind of need to suck in as much of that value from around you as possible. Because like you say, you're not sitting in this massive corporate ecosystem where you've got all that support around you. So. And so tell us about the rest of the year. So what's next? How does things play out between here and kind of Christmas for the business and keeping things rolling?
We'll get the product in market before the end of the year. So there's a little bit of work to be done before to make that happen. But I've kind of like having big, hairy, audacious goals. So the main things for us is kind of finishing off some of the technology stack. So there's a big integration task that we've got to do with our admin partner. So that's sort of well underway. Our website kind of user interface around that's kind of well progressed in terms of kind of what the design looks like, but needs to happen. And then it's really starting to connect with people around their super a bit more. So we've been encouraging people to sort of go on the website. There's a survey to help us better understand more about the super and how they feel about it, so we can kind of really sort of craft the message off the back of that. And they, here's a little plug. They get $5,000. They go in the draw for $5,000 if they fill out that survey, which would be great if they could do that. And then it's just there's sort of building the team out. So
is there a big change in the team between now and kind of post launch? Like, is that going to have to continue to change shape a bit? Because I imagine that once you kind of really load up with customers, that's going to.
Well, it didn't feel sort of 3 or 4 months ago. There was sort of felt like. We could sit around a coffee table like this, and there'd be sort of 3 or 4 people. But we had a team meeting yesterday. There was 11 there, and there's kind of a few others. And so we've been careful not to. You can't hire too far ahead of the curve, and you also have to balance out who you bring on a permanent basis versus kind of what sort of short-term kind of contractors that you might have. And those short-term contractors might all become permanent staff, but you're also kind of just balancing out what's kind of right for the business for right now. And so. So I've had another a technology guy start next week who've been kind of we'll be inducting some more on the kind of people that are on the client experience and sort of how you take that end-to-end service vision and then help to make that a reality, and then what technology CRM solutions and all that you use to do that. And so we just got to all do all of that, right? And so
it's going to be a busy quarter.
And then just like I said earlier, that we've you kind of get over something. Like I've got some really cool things kind of planned for in the new year, and so it's kind of that takes runway to do that. So there's one concept we've got where we feel like people buy even more into our business, our customers, and so we're talking with my chief product officer Tristan the other day, and he's like, well, there's only about 5 insurmountable problems with that idea, right? And so
it's better than 10.
Yeah, no, right? Yeah. Well, yeah. So we're not afraid of that difficulty, right? And so we feel like by kind of ticking off some of those big things, it's going to really make a profound impact.
Yeah, I don't know if it was by design, but definitely coming to launch just before Christmas 2019 means you kind of go live into 2020, which for the branding is pretty good, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I remember back in kind of early 2000s, late 90s, like whenever you're thinking kind of big picture, changing the world, new vision, everyone's like Vision 2020, like it's next year, right?
Exactly.
So that's quite a nice kind of launch coming into 2020 with that.
Was that Hal and there's got a space odyssey with
everything's
2020,
2020, it's amazing, we're here now, so just missing the flying cars and a few other things, but no, actually there are flying cars now, aren't there? But so what would be to kind of tie a bow around where you've come to today? That I reckon there's a bunch of people that we work with, and a bunch of people in our network that either have startups of their own, or they've got ideas that they want to start, or even frankly they're in big corporates, but they've got ideas about new products or services they can bring to those big corporates. And you've kind of been through that cycle now, and you're almost at that point where everything's going to kind of go live. What's the piece of advice you give those people that are just right at the start of that? Like based on the experience you've had over the last few years, like what would you say to them?
Yeah, I'll have a real life example of the sort of friend I've been sort of helping out a little bit, right? And it's kind of getting the idea written down, right? It's really hard to get behind it and get clarity unless you've kind of know what it is. Just get it on a page. And I feel like you can get really caught up in the technical aspects of the idea, and particularly for those that have got sort of more of a analytical kind of engineering kind of finance kind of background. It's like
really enjoy all the detail.
I'm going to create this great algorithm or whatever, right? Like so. What's the problem you're trying to solve? How what's going to be the pitch? And then all the and then go and test it, right? And so. Great if you can get someone to buy it before you build it, but at least you're going to be able to iterate it. And so I feel like sometimes you can get too black boxy and kind of just go away and then go, oh, here's another mousetrap, right? And kind of may not be meeting a genuine customer need. So just getting that sort of clarity,
real clarity, and then make sure you're testing it regularly and getting people to understand and give you that feedback. Yeah,
there's a tool I've pointed a few people at. Like there's a lean stack tool, so it's like a one page, you can find them online, where it just kind of steps you through all the, what's your differentiators, how you get a price it, where you got to make money, what's like, it's just like almost kind of, stepping stone kind of approach, just to get the idea on a page, and then you can go around and you have the coffees and
and then tweak it as you go and get the feedback.
And go, oh, actually it's, it might be that it's fundamental, you might need to pivot quite a few times like we have, right? But you've kind of flexible to do that before you've deployed too much time and effort into building a widget. Right?
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the conversation today. Really, really good to catch up with you and hear that journey, because I think that's it's going to be a really good one to look back on over the next few years, particularly as your business continues to grow. And it sounds like you've got a very busy quarter coming up. So best of luck just nailing that over the next few months in order to have a nice Christmas break. But best of luck with the business. It's been really good, and thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Pete. Appreciate the opportunity.
Not a problem. Cheers.